Reading this from the library. That's a Secret Wars 3 issue. And this includes a storyline that gave me great wisdom, because it teaches us whether there's a creator or a programmer or anything like that or the biggest piece of wisdom for us to reach higher levels of sentience, but really sapience, is to realize that when intelligence, and by the way, with the hardware we have, we can qualify for being an intelligent creature, but only with the software, right? So the software must come. The right kind of software. And so when intelligence is given the chance to control its own evolution, but for that, evolution must give rise to a certain level of intelligence. And for us, it had in the past. We have lost that intelligence. But for me, it's still very wise wisdom that when intelligence is given to evolve to a certain level, it can then control its own evolution. And by the way, it doesn't require technology as you define it. It requires humanics technology, the first form of technology. So yeah, that's a great storyline. My cat is being a bit territorial, let's say, which is normal, but it's inappropriate, because even when he's eating 2 forms of wet food and 2 dry foods that are the better quality ones, the higher level ones, I would say, and even when I buy a bigger bag of cat food, this is how big it gets. Not very big. And the one that he has now is a mostly salmon sweet potato one. So the other day we were sharing a meal together as a family, and both of us had some sweet potato in our meals. Now, my life partner, Maverick, doesn't know, but in a few days we're going to a different location. But he's very familiar with this forest, and even when he's eating his food inside, he's like looking behind him to see if there's another cat possibly he would want to go chase away. And that's not what I'm teaching him, so it'll take a while for him to realize, there's a limit of how much that will serve him, because there's instinctive behavior that, maybe serves a certain purpose sometime or in the past more. But when a species can evolve, like he can, even as an individual, he can realize that it's not always the appropriate time to apply that strategy, like 100% of the time. But when he's in a new place soon, he's going to realize, hey, it's time for him to be humbled, because now he lost all the work that he did in one place to kind of set his territory, chase cats away without even making friends with one cat ever in all the time I had him. So he's going to have to do that and humble himself. And realize that, yes, like me, he can develop the thinking tools to realize he's from this planet. And that's what he's got to safeguard. Not say you can be here, you can't be here, that's mine, that's yours, but this is all of ours, and I'm from here. And hopefully I don't have to always tell you guys stop harming where we're from, which is the entire planet. So I think moving is a strategy that also is part of my lifestyle at this time, but it also will benefit him when I'm teaching him these kind of thinking tools. He's healthy, he's getting right foods, got right play. Yesterday he did scratch me at night when we were doing some play fighting, and I wasn't sure. I would have had to turn the light on, so I wasn't sure if I was bleeding or not. And it turns out I noticed on my pillow that I was. And that's okay, right? But I did notice my skin is adapting. Like, for example, there's a few times in the last week where his claw is pretty deep under my skin, and my skin seems flexible and able to absorb it, that when it comes out, it rarely bleeds. Also, there's something I do when there's been a scratch is I kind of stop moving that skin, look at it for a bit, and see if it settles down and relaxes and closes before things come out. Now, sometimes the bleeding part gets out possible infections that could be from the outside, but outside there's very little scratching of him to me, because we don't do that much kind of play fighting outside compared to inside. Now, when he's inside, I've already kind of cleaned him most of the time. But because we've lived together for a few months now, our biological entities are synchronizing a little bit in the sense of immune system, a little bit, even though they're not the same species. Okay, so Canada is supposed to be a nation that follows the rule of law, supposedly. So if it is, then, and of course it's never been against the International Criminal Court, now that the International Criminal Court has, set out a arrest warrant for Netanyahu, Bibi, I'm almost finished, then they should at least, as a government and as a whole, not one or two, but as a whole, and if they don't do it as a whole or majority, then really they have different agendas. They're tribe versus tribes within the government. That means we don't have government. And they're hypocrites, and they practice laissez-faire. So, they're not really people we should take. I got to be careful what I say here, but for me, if I interacted with one of them, I would say you have no credibility with me. And it's not because I don't believe you are in that role or not, is I believe that you lack the competence in human thinking tools to have me see you as being somebody of authority or with credibility in your role. And I could say this to judges, I could say this to human rights tribunals, ombuds people, presidents of this, CEOs of that. And it's easy for me to prove this by just studying them for a couple of minutes and asking particular questions and seeing that their responses, whether and they could choose not to respond, which again is not good for them. But if they respond, it's easy to point out the incongruences and the cognitive dissonance. So if our government, and it would be like the representative, let's say, of each big party, and even the party of one could be behind the prime minister and say, we're not going to send agents, now that CSIS is a bit more international, we're not going to send agents to kind of arrest him or bring him into custody, but we would request respectfully that he turn himself in. And if they don't do that, which they haven't and they never will, it's incongruent when words come out of their mouth and they say Canada is a country that follows the rule of law. It isn't. And of course, it can't be, okay, we belong to the International Criminal Court, or we support them when it suits us, because that's elitism. It's not democracy or governance or the practice of reason or even a stable proto-society. You don't act like that if you are who you claim to be. And me, recently I got a letter from courts in Quebec saying, and I hadn't contacted them for a while, I just gave up. They're just too incompetent. But, there is a next stage of my culture repair plan with them that I'll get around to at some point. And you would think, it's the top of my priority. No, I've got a lot of culture repairing files open, and to explain the priorities of them would be complicated. So I'm not going to do it because I already lose you sometimes in non-complicated things. So I wanted to say again that it's hard to believe. I could say, for example, if I ever was in front of a judge, hey, judge, what's your opinion of this? Because if you represent the courts, let's say at provincial or national level, and Canada belongs or supports or endorses the International Criminal Court, where have you signed a letter, and it shouldn't be anonymous, it should be transparent, that says that you expect your government to send a strong message to Netanyahu? Now, if you haven't done this, and you might say, it's not my role to advocate, well, no offense, but it is. And there's no limits to where it is. And if you place limits, then chances are you'll place limits in my case too, because I'm an unorthodox person. And if you limit your effort to pay attention and understand this unorthodoxy or uncommonness, but how it is still very much linked to high levels of justice, not just for me or others as a culture of peer, then yes, you are incompetent in your role.